Back again. This is YouGet podcast, episode 124. Sorry we've been away for a while, but we're back again. And I'm actually got my wingman here, friend of the show, will be co-hosting his first co-hosting debut. You know, so we're not going to be harsh on him, but if the views are not there, I know why. We're here. We got Danny. Danny, say hello.
Hey guys, good to be back, and it's good to be back as a co-host for the first time, and definitely not the last. So show this podcast some love.
And we've got a very special guest today. Some people say that Coming to America was based on him.
Talk about it.
Some people say that when you go into the city and you hear H, you see shadows that move.
Some people being me.
You want to introduce yourself today, brother?
Yeah, man. So, guys, thanks for having me on. My name's Hakim. Obviously, very good friends with both of these guys here, and yeah, currently working in tech, and yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So, I guess today, it's been a while since we've done a pod, but we had Hakim come on because we felt like he had an awesome story, but stories to tell, educate, make you guys laugh, but really about kicking off, I guess, the episode about your career journey, really, because you've been quite liberal with who you spend your time with when it comes to like your career, right? You've been in different places. So I guess before we go forward and talk about, you know, where you are currently, I guess let's start from the beginning in terms of like, how did you find yourself where you are?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to go like right to the beginning in terms of where?
Well, not how your parents met, but
yeah. I mean, so yeah, as I've mentioned to obviously Danny a few times. Obviously, I was born in Uganda, and then I moved over to the UK when I was 8, and then like obviously you've spent a lot of my like early childhood like studying, going to like do my A levels, and then of course going to uni. But along the way, I've had some pretty shocking jobs. You know, whether it's paper rounds.
You done paper rounds,
mate? I was paper rounding, direct sales. You might be thinking like direct sales,
Door to door.
I'm talking about door to door, and I was selling makeup on the streets of London.
Nah, you should have stayed in Uganda. What's going on? What's going on? What kind of suffering was that?
Bro, that wasn't in the job description. Okay. But yeah, I've worked in a bunch of different industries, like from kind of doing those like entry level roles, and then to being where I am now, which is of course like TikTok. But yeah, it's been a tumultuous journey.
Yeah,
it has a lot of ups and downs, but like really like comfortable where I am now. You know.
Yeah. So coming to the UK at 8 years old.
Yeah.
Like, are your memories still fresh in terms of how you adapted to coming in and just like a whole different culture? And do you still feel kind of like, because you know people say you've got the king in you, you've got the child in you, right? Do you, as like when you think of yourself, do you think of like you still have vivid memories of like being Ugandan, or is it very much like I'm Ugandan British kind of vibe?
Yeah, I think I'd say I'm obviously like Ugandan first, and then I think British second. But yeah, I have a lot of memories from obviously when I was young, growing up in Uganda, like how different life was. You know, I grew up with my mum moved to the UK to obviously like kind of build a better life for us. So the early days, I was actually living with my mum's sisters. You know,
okay.
I remember me, my brother, and my sister used to share like a single room. I remember just a lot of milk and bread for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Don't worry, man. I'm Ghanaian. We just eat egg and bread sometimes.
Bro, egg and bread was on deck as well. But it was such a different life. My perception of England, even before coming, was what we see on TV: the snow, Santa. Like, me and my siblings' view was like literally the streets are gold plated. You know.
Wow.
And then when we got here, good lord, you know the maddest thing is, we landed in winter.
Wow.
Imagine us three, no coats, nothing, winter.
This really was coming to America.
This is really coming to America, you know. So yeah, I think loads of cultural differences, obviously, like from living in Uganda to moving to the UK.
Yeah.
It definitely took a while to acclimate. You know? Going into like, especially primary school with an accent, everybody can hear it.
Yeah.
Some of my friends still remind me that I had an accent in primary school. So,
what was that like? What was that like at the beginning when you first started going to a school in the UK? You're assimilating. Obviously, you don't know anyone. What was that experience like?
Do you know what? Luckily, my sister was in close age, right? So she was always in the year above me, right? And we were always very close to each other. So I remember my first like couple of weeks in school, like no friends. Everybody was looking at me like that new kid. And I probably sounded a lot like the new kid as well.
Yeah.
But I had my sister in the same school, so that was always someone I could lean on. Like if I felt like something wasn't going right, I'd just run to my sister, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that helped a lot. And yeah, it was a difficult transition, especially like when you don't sound like everybody else, right?
Yeah.
But we got through it in the end, luckily with the support.
At what point did you, or have you, like where do you see as home? And at what point did you start, if ever, start seeing the UK as home?
Yeah, wow. That's a good question. I think I almost see like two homes. I don't ever see like Uganda's home only and then the UK's in home, right? Like Uganda's my home because that's where my family are. A lot of my family's still there. I'd actually say the majority of my family still live in Uganda. Like my mum's siblings, my grandparents are still there, like the ones who haven't passed away, of course. But then now I've lived in the UK for like over 20 years, which is way longer than I lived in Uganda, right? My friends are here now. Like a lot more of my family's here now, and a lot of my friends now I consider my family, right? So I feel like I have two homes, right? So when I go back to Uganda, like I'm home again. When I come back here, it's just like go time and like grind out, but also spend time with my like friends and loved ones for sure.
Okay, so what language do you dream in?
What language do I dream in?
Because that's like apparently that's your truth. That's how you truly see yourself. Like,
you know what's mad? I've been dreaming a lot recently as well. Actually, I can't lie, and it's all been about like crazy stuff that I've gone through in the day. But language.
So what? You got more fuss in the back and say, "Remember who you are, Simba." Remember,
bro. My second name's Bukenya, and in the Lion King, it's, you know? So everyone used to always use that as a little segue, you know. But language I dream in, boy, I don't know. Probably English. I'd probably say no.
Okay,
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I guess then we fast forward.
Yeah.
So you find yourself, what was your first time where like you got your first career job where you were like, okay, cool, man's making cheddar. Like I could take mum's cinema and spoil it a little bit. When was that first independent?
Yeah. Do you know what? When I was in so post paper round, post direct sales, I did a job in a small town I went to school in where I was a market research analyst. I think I was getting paid like, I don't know, maybe like £6 an hour. I was racking in the hours basically.
Okay.
Literally after school, go and do 4-hour shift, go back home. Weekends, try to get like a longer shift, right? And I managed to save up enough money where I could do stuff with like my brother and stuff. So that was probably the first job, but that job was not an easy job. It was literally like a call center job, like working with like companies like Mecca Bingo, ringing up their customers and saying, "Hey, how was your previous visit? Rate out of 10."
Oh,
it was rough.
In your Ugandan accent.
Yo, no, that wasn't that. I was in sixth form by then.
Okay,
so I'd obviously grown up.
Yeah.
I should have tried that then.
They would have definitely thought that. It's definitely 419. Something's gone wrong. Something's gone wrong. But Danny, what I was gonna say before we go on, what was your hardest job? What was the job that you were like, oh, man, I'm suffering out here?
Retail. I have so much sympathy for people that work in retail. That was my first proper job on the books. Before that, I did some door-to-door sales when I was like 14, 15.
Okay.
All like just off the book stuff.
Yeah.
I remember before I got my first job, I would at school go and print out my CVs and then ride around on my bike to try and hand them out. Anything like kebab shops. Yeah. But I asked my barber for a shop. I asked my barber for a job to sweep the floor because I just wanted to have money. So I could go out and just do whatever I want. But yeah, retail was hell, and I think it humbled me. And to this day, I always think like that was horrible.
Did you have a CV before the retail job? What was that CV?
Yeah, my CV just had like stuff I did at school, like clubs. That's how bad it was. But after retail, then like my first corporate job was obviously when I was on placement, I was in banking, and that I think opened the doors and changed a lot. But I think, you know, jobs like those younger jobs you do in your teen years teach you a lot. And I feel for example, for you doing those door-to-door sales, for example, doing direct sales, for example, or calling up in a call center, like, do you feel like you still carry forward any of the lessons or values? And if so, like, how does that translate into your career today?
Yeah, great question. I know I was talking about that door-to-door sales job and I didn't get into it too much. But let me give some background to that story because I think it's interesting, right? So this is before I do the call center job. So I'm looking for a job. I go on Indeed, I brush up my CV and I throw my CV in. this job is direct sales in Canary Wharf, right? I'm thinking,
I made it.
honestly, I'm telling my sister, my mama, pack your bags, we're gone. Yeah. So anyways, I get my suit, I buy a suit from Next, I get dressed up, I go to this job interview, right?
Those next suits were
Right?
perfect. Prom,
Honestly.
Next.
You had the skinny tie.
Bro, honestly. Anyway, so I get dressed up now, I've got my best suit on,
Yeah.
some Clark shoes probably. And then I get there and I'm thinking it's going to be an interview.
Cool.
I get there and it's a room full of people, everyone's standing up. A guy at the front comes and does some Wolf of Wall Street, like literally like motivational speech. I'm thinking, what's going on here? And then I find out basically, so what this company does is basically if you join the company, they give you a territory in London. Your job is to basically walk up and down that territory and sell this makeup kit, right? It's basically a makeup kit which opens up.
So wait, when like, are we saying makeup for like makeup?
Bro,
Because-
makeup for women.
Cause this I saw like from Power, yeah, they give me a black. I go up and down the street. I just go like makeup, bro. That doesn't sound.
This is exactly what I was thinking. You like interview, this guy drops a big black bag on the floor. Honestly, and he's like, guys, pulls out the product and is like, we need to make sure we can shift these. I'm thinking,
Bro,
I've never sold
Mad.
anything in my life. Yeah. And the worst thing about the job is there was no base salary. Like you only earn on commission,
Yeah.
right? So if each single item was £20, you would earn like £5 off each one. But anyway, so that job was like, I think the job.
Did you sell much?
Listen, it's not about did I sell much. It's all about did I apply myself.
Exactly. I can tell you right now, when I did my direct sales, actually take a guess. What do you think I was selling? I was going door to door in my neighborhood.
Probably beard oil on you.
Shout out Goodman Factory, referral code. I was selling solar panels
bro, how old were you?
in a low income area.
They say
I was
you're to-
15.
They say you're to fail. They're like, nah, he'll never shift anything.
I sold nothing. I earned nothing.
But yeah, no, to go back to that point, before that job, I think I'd really like, I've always thought myself as quite confident, right? But like, I'd find myself in rooms where I didn't feel as confident, right? And this job specifically forced me to basically go to like random people and like, hi, introduce myself. This is the product and try to convert, right? So that job for me taught me a couple of things. Like one is resilience, but also like sometimes it's having confidence.
Yeah.
And they're the two things which from that one job, they've carried me through every single job I've had, you know? Because there were days when I was doing direct sales and I knew I needed to make 3 sales, £15 to cover my transport cost, which was £11 for the train, and I could spend £4 on lunch, right? As long as I broke even, I could keep going, right? I know it sounds wild, but that was the maths I was doing in my head, right? And there'll be days where I'd go and I make 1 sale. I spent 6 hours on in my territory. I literally made only 1 sale, you know? And I had to keep going back every single day. And over time, I started to get a bit better at the job. Yeah. Hitting my my minimum threshold, covering my costs. Yeah. And then after a while, I was like, this is not going to scale, you know? But it definitely taught me a lot about resilience, I think. And just and just showing up and being confident for sure. Yeah.
Your first job in tech. Now, would you say fair enough, like when you got into that space, it was when everyone was trying to get in, or were you in before it became a hype? Because you were in before like influencing was really a thing, really, where people just thought tech was IT. So like, what was like? Take our listeners back to like when you got in and what was the landscape like?
And also why?
It's a bit of a funny story, but I want to give like most of the credit should actually go to my mum for this, and the story makes more sense as I tell it. But I was actually like working in tech startups, like I think even before my first year of uni, that was my first experience. I interned for CEO. Right? This is long before TikTok, long before Facebook. That was my first experience. But anyways, my mum knew I always wanted to go into business. I want to start my own business, and she was like, "Okay, like let's go to this business show." She booked some tickets to go to the Excel, where they do the big business show every year, and she was like, "Okay, Hakim, this is where you're gonna find a mentor who can help you kind of close that gap, right?" So me and my mum are walking around, and I've got this crazy, when I tell you a shiny blue suit, it was shining. Man. Like if you hit a light on it, it was reflecting. That's the only suit I had at the time. So we go to this conference anyways, and she sees this young guy talking. Later on, this guy will become Rob, who's one of my mentors. She's like, "Hakim, that's the one, I think. Like, he looks young, you can go talk to him, he has a startup." But these times, again, I'm still a bit nervous, you know? Like, I don't feel confident enough to go up to him and be like, "Hi, I want you to be my mentor." I don't even know how to ask for a mentor during this time, right? Anyways, long story quite short, you can imagine my mum grabs me by the back and just like pushes me to this guy, right?
Yeah.
I'm so nervous, right? I don't know what to say to him, and I'm like, "Hi, I came to this business conference because I want to find a mentor because I want to start my own business." And he was like, "Do you? Do you know what it's going to take?" I was like, "I'm not sure, but I'm willing to learn." And then he goes, "Sure, here's my LinkedIn, drop me a message." And I was like, yeah, sure. These times I've got no LinkedIn. I don't know what LinkedIn is.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, as soon as I get home, I'm creating LinkedIn and I'm going to reach out to him. So I get back home and I set up my LinkedIn and I message him once, he doesn't respond. I message him twice, he doesn't respond. A third time and he doesn't respond. But every message is different and every message is becoming more and more desperate.
Happy summer, happy winter, happy spring, happy New Year. Oh.
And then I was like, you know what, I've got to go one more shot. I go one more shot and I say, look, this is a dream of mine. And like, I tell him why I think like he should be my mentor basically. Probably terribly worded back then as well. He replied, he said, meet me here for coffee. All right.
Like, so he was seeing your messages then?
Yeah, and he tells me why. He tells me why.
Okay,
I meet him for a coffee. So then I go to Old Street for the first time. Obviously, I grew up in Watford. I don't think I'd ever been to Old Street before. I didn't even know it was like where loads of these tech startups are based or whatever. I go to Old Street. I meet him for a coffee, and then he says, "You're probably wondering why I took so long to reply." And he was like, "I wanted to see if you had the resilience." That's like one of the key
Mr. Miyagi,
an entrepreneur, right? And he says, then he talks me through what his business does. And he says, look, we don't really have a role for you at the moment, but if you want to come and see how the business runs and support on anything you can be my intern, basically. Right.
Mad.
Wow.
So I go to work for, his name's Rob Symes. And honestly, one of the best like experiences. I got to see like, what does the CTO do? Like, what does the sales and marketing team do? Like what really stresses Rob out, like on a day-to-day basis. But more importantly, like, this idea that you have to get close to something that you want to become or do, because then you begin to see it as real, right? If you never get close enough to something, you can never really see it.
The real learning on the job.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so that was my first foray. I worked for Rob for around a couple of months until I had to go back to uni. But that there was still one of my best experiences, because off the back of that, Rob was like, okay, so you want to do this startup. The first thing you have to do is think about what problem you want to solve. And then I figured out like something I wanted to solve, and then he helped me find like a designer, like, this is how you should think about hiring a CTO. So it really helped me get started in that process.
Oh, wow.
And that was my first foray into whatever the hell tech was then.
Yeah.
That was my first kind of experience. And it was generally just like the good deed of a random CEO who saw this kid who came up to him in a business conference and wanted to just give him a chance. And that completely changed, I'd say, my whole life trajectory. Right?
Wow.
Because I was exposed to it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think if it wasn't for that, like, I don't like to say ifs, buts or maybes, but I don't know if I'm here, like, without that experience, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, that was my first foray into tech.
Please
shout out mum if you're listening.
Yeah.
Shout out to auntie, because please tell me you've got that blue suit, like.
Oh, I've got the picture.
Yeah, you got to frame that.
Oh, I've got it somewhere.
Because he saw that suit, he was like, ah.
Yeah. And I remember even like back then, Rob was like, you need to have a plan or something, and you got to write it down, right?
Yeah.
I remember back then I wrote down on this small piece of paper like everything I wanted to accomplish within the next 5 years, right?
Jeez.
And granted, not everything came true, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously I had some failure along the way, but it was crazy how it all nearly came true, you know? And I still have that piece of paper somewhere. Like I've got a picture of it somewhere as well. So I look back at that sometimes and I'm
good.
like, it's a tough day, right? Like shit was a lot worse. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to that moment where your mum took you to the conference.
Yeah.
That's amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, I think, symbol of support and her belief in you and how she wanted to uplift and empower you. Talk to us a little bit more about your relationship with your mum and actually, you know, what does she want for you? What were some of the values that maybe she instilled? Because I think that's amazing to do that.
Yeah. I think like when I look back at that moment, like, and I spoke to her about this as well. We had a real emotional conversation about it. Like, as I move in my career and progress more, like we'll sit down and I'll take her out for dinner, and I always thank her for that moment. Like if there's one moment I have to thank her about, it's that specific moment, because as I mentioned, I think it changed a lot. But you know, my mum had us when she was young. At least my dad and her split up when she was young, and her whole idea was like she had to find a way to make a better life for her children, right?
Yeah.
I don't know many mums who leave their children in Uganda, go work abroad, working in care homes, doing like, I don't know what job she was doing, but she was really struggling like sometimes not even knowing where she was going to sleep and stuff, right? And I think for her, like she always says, like her goal has always been like, I need to make sure that my kids have a better life than I've had, right? And I think about that too now, right? When I look at my little brother and I'm like, he needs to have a lot better start than we did. He needs to have all the information I have and if not more, you know? But yeah, to go back to my mum, I think that's her overarching kind of ethos is like she wants to build a better life for her kids. And that's something that like, it's hard to thank your mum for that, you know, because you don't even see the sacrifices they make, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, she's a very special person in my specific life, and both personally and professionally, she's helped me in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And she does it for all our siblings, actually. Like thinking about where we came from, looking at kind of where a lot of like my siblings are, like she's done a pretty decent job. All of us have graduated like with very good grades. All of us are in like pretty decent jobs. Just a woman from a small country village in Uganda who did that, you know? And I only think it's only going to get better for the next generations of us as well. So yeah, mama, shout out to you.
Shout out to mum.
Yeah, that's huge.
I was going to say, so it seems like your early start of your career, a lot of people would listen to that, and myself included, like quite blown away in terms of like how much of a head start you meeting that initial mentor was. Like I didn't even know what mentors were really until I was kind of mid in my career, like until someone was like, you need a mentor whilst I had a job. Do you feel as if like that, it's not maturity per se, but you're more serious in terms of how you live your life aspect wise? Because sometimes when you get a lot of this information that like, you know, life's not a game, and it happens to you at a young stage, you don't get to make maybe a crazy trip to Vegas or making stupid mistakes. It's like you grow up quite fast because you have the information. You can't now. If you're stupid, it's like you knew better, and you don't really want to do it. So do you still like how's it been like getting that information so soon?
Yeah. Look, I think, as I mentioned, like I think that whole situation, like Rob, like just for me, like life changing, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to understand the person I was before that, right? Because that's where the big shift was, right? So like I wasn't super academic in school. It's not that I didn't try, but you know when you're young in school, you just want to go out with your friends, you want to have fun, like, and I wasn't great academically. Like I did okay in my GCSEs, pretty decent in my A levels, but like could I have done the best I could have as an example? Like no, right? And that's just because I wasn't really focusing on like what I wanted to accomplish. And I think having that experience just taught me that there's so much more to life that you can accomplish if you apply yourself, you know? I think if you were to ask my mum again, like me before and me post, it's a completely different person because of that experience, right? Because the information you get, right? And I think that last point I mentioned before, which is like, once you can see something, right? Like it becomes easier to accomplish once you can see it right in front of you, you know? And I think that's, as I mentioned, I think that's definitely like helped me a long way in my career. And there's still loads of things I take from maybe seeing how like he operates in meetings, or how he's like, make sure when you're meeting, you make sure you speak early, right? So you get those butterflies out, right? And I use this now in big meetings I'm in with some of my clients, or even internally. So there's still things from that day that I still use now, you know?
Okay.
What about with your youngest brother?
Yeah.
Obviously he's still very young, but when he starts getting to that same sort of age that you were when you started making those pivots in your career and in your life, what do you think you want to do to be able to sort of open up opportunities for him, and where would you like to see him go?
Yeah. It's tricky. Like, I guess he's 11 now, so he's got time.
Now the time you got to pay tax.
Yeah.
You know what? We tried Project Mbappe, but he loves Fortnite so much, honestly. I think it's important to give like him like room to discover what he's passionate about, right? If it was up to me, he would be like coding and studying computer science now, and maybe he'll become my CTO one day, right? But I think like we all do this consciously at home, is like we want to give him like the freedom to be able to experience like the stuff that we didn't. For example, he goes to a slightly different school than we went to. He's doing like fencing. He's joined like chess club. He's doing rugby. He's doing cricket. Like his exposure to some of the things that we didn't even get to do when we were younger, even from this activity perspective, is so different. And And we're still trying to get him involved in things such as like making sure you're reading about the topics you're interested in, as an example. Like he's super interested in like planets and stuff. Right? So like we'll get him books about planets so he can learn about all the different planets, right? And once he decides what he wants to do, so if that's tech, then I'm right there, my brother's there, my sister's there, my mum's there, his dad's there, like to help him really understand how we can break into this industry. But we're going to give him that freedom to decide what he wants to do. And once he decides, then he's always going to have our full support, right? And any mistakes I've made along the way, I can be like, bro, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, you know? So that he doesn't make the same ones I have. So
do you feel like, or how do you feel like that perhaps can affect things like his future drive and ambition? I think obviously when you grow up in certain circumstances and you experience certain things, it instills certain values in you. And I think about this with my younger sister as well. She's 13 now. She's had a very different upbringing to the one that I had. And it's great. And I'm so happy and very grateful for the fact that she's able to have a more positive experience than I did perhaps at that age. But at the same time, where's that balance? How do you still instill drive and ambition and the right values?
Yeah, I'm the wrong sibling to ask, right?
Cool.
At least out of all of us.
So you're the wacky sibling then.
I'm the one who gets like.
We should have brought Eddie on.
Yeah, you should have brought Eddie on. Yeah, exactly. My younger brother. I'm not great too much in terms of like establishing like what he can and can't have. Like he knows, for example, out of all the siblings, like he can go to like Sam, he can go to Eddie, he can go to his mum, go to his dad, and they'll be like, no, you just got this the other day. But then he'll reach out to me on the sly on WhatsApp or something. He'll be like, hey, Hakim, can I come around yours? I want to talk to you about something. And he'll come with like a full pitch, you know? Ever since you told me about what you made your sister do about like, if you want something, give us a full presentation.
A PowerPoint deck.
Yeah,
wow.
PowerPoint. He's now got PowerPoint decks. He'll come with a little PowerPoint deck. Now he's got his own laptop at home that he uses for school. Like he'll come with a full deck like, Hakim, this is my Christmas list. Now let me tell you why I want this Christmas list. I need this microphone because I want to start streaming. And hey, the big gaming prizes now, you know. So that's the monetary value from it, you know. So yeah, I don't think I'm the best to go back to your point, but I think when it comes to things such as like school and his reading as an example, like I'm always checking in on that heavily, right? Like I know his grades, like I know all his grades and how he's trending. Like, I know what book he's reading. Like I like him if he's reading a book. I'm like, oh, what do you think of that book? Right? I want him to begin to form his own opinions. So there's elements where I think I'm really good, but then there's areas where I think like if you ask me something, I normally just like get it for him. But I'm working on that
balance.
Working on that slowly.
I guess like if we have to shift gears. Now you've been working, you've had a mentor, great family support. Now that you've been out in the world, I guess, what have you seen? Because you've been exposed to tech for a long time. And I guess my question is like, what have you seen out there that's portrayed about tech that you're like, that's cap, that's bogus, do you feel like how you've come into the game, now being in the game, you're like, it's been misrepresented or it's been twisted, or like, what's your views on the outside looking in on people that work in tech or just or professionals in the corporate space? Like, what's your view? Are you angry about it? Are you happy about it?
You know, the thing is for me, like, and I guess like my actual first start in tech. So like when I think about my internship, that was an internship, right? When I think about my first proper job in tech, it would have been my experience at Facebook, right? And I'll be honest with you, I actually think that skewed my understanding of like what tech is supposed to be, right?
How do you mean like?
This is a couple of years ago, of course. I must caveat. You know, I went over and joined Facebook, and I was based in the Irish office. You know, you get to Facebook and you've got free breakfast, free lunch, free dinner. Your gym is paid for, or they give you an allowance at least. I think we even had like a laundry allowance. We had some crazy allowances.
Life was sweet
back then, right? Life was sweet, honestly, right? And that was my first like foray into tech, and being new into it, I was like, whoa, this is insane. Where does all this money come from, right? So I think my view of like the workplace has been slightly like, I don't know how I say it, not misconstrued, I guess I say, right? Because now I've moved from a company like Meta, and I see some of my friends working in other companies, and they don't get half the benefits, right? Okay. So sometimes it can be detrimental to get everything so early, in my opinion. Right?
Too much too soon.
Thoroughly grateful for everything there. Thank you, Mark.
So like, so I know when I got into the tech space this year, it was always the kind of the lens looking from the out. I came from an old corporate company, going into it was very much like, okay, cool. You know, we move fast, we make decisions, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is where the fun happens. And then as everyone saw, it was like, economy went to shit, it was been in shit, but then I guess my view's kind of been like how the way the dynamic shifts, where it's like the branding of, you know, big tech companies, smaller tech companies, we're a family kind of brand, you know, and it quickly goes into, I'll probably say more, it quickly turns, when times get hard, it turns aggressively corporate than your traditional corporate companies, I would say. And like, have you seen that transition this year, or do you feel like a transition was made in between your time at Facebook, now Meta, and where you are at now? Like, have you seen this gradual, I don't know, maturity or skepticism in the industry, or what do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, I think, because it's been a long time since I guess all of us have worked at similar companies since we face some of the things we're facing now, such as redundancies and restructuring, right? I do think like these things are cyclical in nature, right? So if you just look at a graph of when the last, for example, like crash was in tech, right?
Yeah.
Like these things happen in a cyclical nature, and they're normally impacted by like broader macro factors, right? Now, like looking at the industry now, like it's a really tough time, right? And I know what you say about like it's a family, and this is how these companies kind of like, I guess, frame everything. But I think we have to remember at the very core of it, like these are businesses, right? These businesses have shareholders to answer to, right? So like some of the things I'm seeing happen now, like they're just a byproduct of where we are economically, right? And it's not easy. And for me personally, like it's really challenging. I'm seeing some of my best friends who are moving to like new companies and being made redundant, as an example. But if I take a step out, like, and like take my emotions out of it, like these companies have people to answer to, and as a result of that, they have to make really, really difficult decisions. I don't think any of the decisions which are being made by any of these CEOs are coming easy to them, you know? I think they're forced into making these decisions. And again, as I mentioned, I think they have shareholders to answer to. And also because of the economic conditions that they're going through. But I truly think these times will pass, right? There'll be more companies being built. If you think about the dot-com crash, like some of the biggest companies were built off the back of that, right? This is probably the best time to start a company, you know? So I think we'll see tech continue to come out of this slump and go back to where it was before. So I'm optimistic about the industry as a whole, for sure.
Okay, so you're not like waving the red flag, like...
Oh, no. I love tech, I think, and I think it's been a great experience. And if you want to stay at the forefront of things, this is where to be, I think, generally.
I think as well, like you make a very good point around it being cyclical. I think tech's had a very strong bull run for many years now, and I think the last decade has been surreal in some aspects. So I think, you know, it was going to happen sooner rather than later, and I think we were I think this was somewhat postponed as a result of the pandemic and the big boom that we saw in terms of screen time usage, and you know, we saw TikTok just absolutely explode during lockdown. So I think things are going to return to quote unquote normal in some regards, and I also think, to your point, cyclical as well. You know, a recession was going to come sooner or later, and I think it's a tough time right now in the industry. But to your point, hopefully things do pass eventually.
So like outside of work, who is Prince Hakim? Like, in this year, do you feel like you've got to know yourself? Because 2 years in the pandemic, you've come out. Like, how do you feel generally, like, about life? Like, do you feel like you've matured? Do you feel like you switched up? Do you feel like I've got my shit together now, I'm ready to have 5 kids?
Yeah, 5, you know. Look, I don't know about like everyone else, but like for me, that pandemic period was a pretty like difficult time, right? Like, there's a lot of isolation. I was trying to save up to buy a house during as soon as lockdown kicked off. But I think like what lockdown was really good for is like allowing you to build new habits, you know, whether it's financial habits, whether it's fitness habits, whether it's eating habits. I think they're the things which I can take out of lockdown as kind of a big takeaway, right? Where do I feel like I am now? Like, I feel like I'm in a really good place. Maybe the best place I've been in. You know, I've got my first house now. I'm doing well in terms of saving. I've got like a decent job. I need a +1 to that wedding though next year.
I got everything I want in my life. The girlfriend.
Yeah, exactly. So there's still a couple of things outstanding, but like, I'm working hard. I don't know.
You said, obviously earlier, one of the points that you made was around, your mentor told you to write everything down on a piece of paper, and some of those things came true, some of the things didn't. Are you still looking at your life at this stage as like the next 5 years, or are you looking shorter term, longer term? And actually, what are some of those things that you're looking at over the next few years?
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you know what? It's been a while since I've written anything down, like in terms of like planning my next 5 years out. I feel like life has been very hectic recently, but I do have a couple of things which like I'm very fully aware of that I want to accomplish in the next coming years, right? So one of the things is, and we've been talking a lot about it, is like what's the next business venture we want to get into, right? So that's one aspect of things in terms of building something that, I can hand down, right? And then the second element, which is one of the things I'm working on, is like, how do I invest like better, right? And that's really money habits, right? So like, if I'm getting paid, how do I allocate money to invest, right? And start to build long-term wealth, right?
Yeah.
Or start to build habits, which can help me build long-term wealth. And then the third aspect is obviously I've got now into property for the first time, and like, yeah, property is a good game. It's a good game, right? So now I'm thinking about like what I want to do there. Like I want to get my a second flat, maybe somewhere up north, begin to rent that out, and hopefully begin to build a portfolio of like properties. But yeah, look, the main thing is I want to make, a lot of money, of course. I want to be successful, and like, I want to, of course, like use that to do a couple of things. One is like, of course, I'd love to retire my mum, and that's always going to be my goal, right? But then secondly, like, I'm so aware that there's so many other like kids who were me, right? Whether they live in London now, right? Or even back in Uganda. And like I think long term, that's going to be my mission, right? To like help kids who maybe don't have so many of those chances, and like even just tell them my story and help them kind of get on that journey. And that's why I want to get to that point in my career, at least, right? It's not all about money. It's actually like leaving some sort of legacy, which we talk about a lot. So.
And finding that plus one.
Exactly. If you're listening.
No, so you speak about the whole, like when you get to that certain point, I picked up on it. Do you feel like you have to get to that point? Because for me, it's like you've got a story enough whereby you can already be going out and be giving talks to young people, young professionals in terms of coaching and life experience. Or is this a thing with you where you're like, I kind of want to get to the end of my quote unquote story, and then I'll tell the whole story? Or like, what's your view on it? Are you very self-critical about? Yeah,
I'm very. I think it's probably one of my biggest weaknesses. I'm very self-critical, right?
Okay.
Like I still feel very, and this is, I don't know how many people feel like this, but I feel very unaccomplished, right?
Okay. Multiple properties, wants to get property in North London.
Yeah, we can blame that on my mum. Maybe she set too much drive, right? Yeah, I mean, like, I think I always feel like this sometimes. I'm like, I can do more here, I can accomplish more. And I think that's a benefit of having, like, really successful friends around you, actually, right? Because the benchmark is now higher, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of kind of those pieces I want to do around, going and speaking in schools and, like speaking to kids, maybe from, like, disadvantaged backgrounds, like, these are things I've tried to do more and more of. So, like, whether it's... in a previous job, like going to schools in London and kind of like, telling them my story, but also like how I got on this placement as an example. Like that's one aspect of it. But one thing I'm trying to do more of is actually like be a bit more spontaneous with how I think about helping people. So like the other day, me and one of my best friends, Ryan, were in Reese in Brent Cross shopping, and then we just got talking. Money. I tell you what, I didn't buy that. So anyways, we're in Brent Cross shopping, and then there's this like young Nigerian kid, and he's helping us basically just pick out outfits, right?
Yeah.
But the way he was doing it was like, I've never experienced someone going so above and beyond. Like, I think this is good on you. You should try this. Actually, not sure. Like, really going above and beyond.
Okay.
Right?
He was a sales assistant.
Assistant. And I was like, and maybe there's loads of really great sales assistants, but that's the first one I'd experienced.
Don't go Zara.
Yeah.
They're not there. Yeah.
I said to him, what do you want to do? He was like, I'd love to stay in sales, maybe go in tech. But I'm graduating soon. And he's like, but I'm not quite sure, like, the route into tech, right? Anyway, so we exchanged numbers, and same way that, like, Robert told me to, like, reach out to him, I said, look, this is my number. You reach out when you're ready. Before I got home, he'd reached out, all right?
Did you ignore him?
Yes, I actually did. Yeah. The first one I did. I wasn't going to do it for though. The world has changed a lot since back then. So I ignored the first one. Yeah. And then The second one, I was like, okay, cool, brilliant. I was like, so what do you want to do? He was like, listen, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but this is what I'm studying. I think he was studying mechanical engineering. He was like, but I really want to go into tech, but I'm not sure about all the different functions that I can go into. So I said to him, you know what, like, when you're not working, I invited him to our London office, TikTok London office, for like half a day. And then what I did, I basically went around and found different people within the business who could talk to him about what they do, right?
Wow.
So yeah, I think like doing little things like that, because now for him, now he's thinking like, oh, maybe I can apply for a grad job at TikTok, or maybe not at TikTok, but I can apply for a grad job maybe in another tech company, because now he's seen like what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
If you can't see it, sometimes you can just, you don't even bring yourself to kind of get over the barrier of applying, right? So yeah, I'm trying to do more things like that where I can. Yeah, I need to probably be a bit more structured, I guess, with how I do those things. But
no, but you would have probably made his day, I guess, like in terms of, because he would have earnestly been doing that job not to get anything out of it. Because he would have just normally got thank yous and for someone to turn around and say, hey, like, what do you want to do? Yeah, he probably doesn't get that often.
Yeah, but you know, sometimes you look at people and you're just like, you can sometimes see potential in people, and I could just see like, you can just tell when someone's passionate about what they do, and you know what they say, how you do anything is how you do everything, right?
Yeah.
So that gives you an indication maybe about how you approach another role and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, net, I think it was just for him, it was like a great experience just to meet people, learn about the functions, and look, if I've helped him spark an interest, then I think that's okay. You know, that's an okay outcome.
He definitely put on his CV 1 day internship at.
I told him if he needs a referral code, you know, just let me know. He's already got one.
Yeah. So Danny, I was gonna ask, like, from your perspective, when it comes to, have you felt like you want to finish your story before you mentor, or are you very much like, no, like, I'll give any gems I have now, big or small?
You know what? I think early on, I thought that I had to feel like I'm accomplished in order to give back. Mm-hmm. But as time has gone on, I think I've really realized that there's so much that we can give now in terms of value, whether it's career advice, whether it's, for example, business advice and, you know, mistakes to make and, you know, risks to take and so on. I think I've done some mentorship, especially through university.
Okay.
I think more than anything, it's just about being able to give support, being able to give your insight. And I don't think you need to wait 10 years, 20 years, or wait to hit a certain number in your bank account to be able to give that advice. I think for other people, having somebody that you can relate to, and I think Hakim touched on the point very well in terms of, you know, once you see it, it becomes more real to you. Yeah. So I think, you know, for people like us around our age bracket and, you know, the things that we've done in our career, if we're able to give back to somebody around our age or younger, we can definitely offer value. And I think it's something that I've tried to do, and I think it's something that we'll continue to try to do as my career goes on.
You know what's strange, right? It's always go through this thing where I look at my career, my own career, I'm like, I feel like I've done pretty well.
You have.
I feel like I'm pretty smart. And then there's this whole thing where it's like, rather than helping a FTSE 100 or a, you know, a CEO in a foreign land more wealthier, like, why don't I just go out and do this myself? And I was wondering, like, do you guys, and Danny, I know you've got your own business, but when we've all been in that career space, is there a sense of like self-antagonizing where it's like, man, like, you get a flurry of emails like, sort out this $1 million account. It's like, it's $1 million, but it'll go in my bank account. That sort of thing. Like, do you ever get that feeling of like, fuck, I should just be entrepreneurial and better myself? Because really, at the end of the day, we'll talk about tech, we'll talk about organizations, but ultimately, as we've seen in this like downturn, you can be let go, you can be replaced, and that business keeps churning. But if you put that energy into, say, yourself, you know, that, like, I like to say, you know, crypto stocks, you know, people say, you know, oh, you know, the market's down, you can't invest. But I'm like, there's one market that you could always invest in. Yourself. Yeah. Sure. You're always going to return in value. But like, that's just been like, even me, I've been thinking, I did feel like disillusioned when like, you get all these companies say, oh, making redundancy, whatever, because it's like, shit, man.
You want to future-proof yourself again.
And even if it wasn't, it's not even about future-proofing, but I was like, if I'm going to hit the mud, I'd rather hit the mud because I fucked up. Not because, I don't know, you went to a venture capitalist firm and said, oh, we can grow 50% for 10 years and no shit, Sherlock, you can't. So, yeah. Have you ever gone through that feeling of like...
Yeah, and I think, especially for me, right, like, obviously with my mentor and obviously like having a go at doing a startup and ultimately failing, of course. I shouldn't say of course, but I did fail. That little bug will always be in me. Like it's impossible for it not to be in me, and it can hit me like at any point in the day. You know, maybe I see something, I'm like, oh fuck, that should be done way easier, or we should do this like this. You know? So I do definitely think about like, you know, that entrepreneurial side, and I think long term it's where I'll be anyways, right? In terms of like building businesses, but I do think, and Danny, please jump in if you disagree. Like when you work in tech and you have everything, right? It's really hard to think like, you know what?
That's the golden handcuffs.
You know, that's always one of the big challenges, right?
Yeah.
Like, but for sure, definitely, I think about it, and it's definitely like somewhere I know that I'm slowly gravitating towards. Right? What about you?
I think, I mean, I have a point and then I have a question. I think number one, yes, of course, there's moments and, you know, passing thoughts where you're thinking, oh, like I could be doing something myself or I should be doing something myself. But it doesn't mean that where you are now or where you've been previously isn't the right place to be. I think, you know, a lot of people, especially nowadays, particularly because of social media and how it's glamorized entrepreneurship, think that they have to have their own business or have to be, you know, driving forward with the notion of like ownership. Yes, of course, that's great and amazing. But at the same time, there are so many valuable lessons to be learned as an employee for a big, small or medium-sized corporation. So many things that I know now, I wouldn't have known if I hadn't spent that time in tech or banking or even some of the smaller jobs I've done as a teenager in retail and so on. So I think there's no knock at all. Yes, of course, you know, the longer term goal, to your point, is always going to be, can I be fully self-employed and financially independent through entrepreneurship? But in the meantime, working in these corporates, even during tough times, you know, you learn so much, soft skills and hard skills, and I think gives you access to things like saving so that you can start a business. It gives you access to things like a network, skills, learning, development. So there's that, and I think Hakim, to your point as well, the golden handcuffs make it real hard, especially it's tough. But I had a question actually to follow up on. Obviously, you mentioned a moment ago about your startup that failed. Talk to us a little bit about, you know, what was that startup? What was the purpose? Why did you get into it? And what eventually happened?
Yeah. Long story, strap in tight, lads. So yeah, as I mentioned, when I was working with Rob, who was my mentor at the time, like his whole thing was like, just find a problem and try solve it and build an MVP, right? And for me back then, God knows, this is probably like 5-6 years ago now. My problem was like I used to hate going into the barbershop and waiting, right? Like, you know what it was like, you go and you sit down, you sit there for 2 hours.
You just lost your whole Saturday.
Bro, like, you have to go on like a day where it's real recluse, no one's there, but like you don't want to go that day.
Exactly.
You want to go as close to the weekend as possible, right?
Yeah.
And obviously I'd seen like there's loads of like companies digitizing like these processes, right? So my thinking was like, fuck, we could probably build an Uber for barbers and their clients, right? So anyways, I say to Rob, like, I think we can build this idea. He was like, all right, build it. Like, what do you need? Like, what help do you need? And then I was like, oh, I'm not sure what it's going to look like. He was like, okay, you need to read about this. You can learn about UX. This is Jacek, who's my UX designer. He can help you with some like UI stuff. My co-founder was a guy called Zaf, and that was a guy I was on placement with. Right? So we met on placement, and you know, like he had the same mindset as me, which is like, we need to do something cool. You know, we need to do something meaningful, right? So anyways, we ended up working on this business anyways for around about 2 years, right? A very small team. It was me, Zaf, and Hakim, who was our CTO at the time, and then we had Jacek, who was our designer at the time. Look, ultimately we ended up failing, right? And there were a lot of things along the way which led to kind of failure. I look back, you know, a lot of the decisions that, as one of the co-founders, like that I made, that weren't probably the best decisions, you know.
Like what?
Like hiring. Like, turns out you need to be really good at hiring if you want to build a successful company. You know, we went through like 2 or 3 developers. We tried to outsource the development. We lost so much money. But as you make more of these mistakes, you're like, fuck, I can't make that mistake.
Yeah.
But these times I'm thinking,
it's
like,
another new mistake.
I wish I could, you know. But bear in mind again, like I'm giving you this story in like in time frames as well. So some of these stories I'm telling you, like post my internship. Now I'm like in the middle of uni as I'm trying to build this business, right? Hiring, I think we didn't do well, right? And
why is it in terms of their skill set or them as people?
I think, look, the biggest takeaway is, especially when you're like hiring for super, super technical jobs, right? Like, you need to be able to fully understand the person's capabilities, right? Put the right tests in place so you can see that person's capabilities, right? And also have someone review their code like frequently, right? Especially like at the level we were operating at with very small scale, right?
That means you definitely brought on someone that was completely fugazi.
I wouldn't say that, just in case he's watching, but it was a shaky time. But anyways, like bad hiring, I think is one, right? And I think maybe when I look back at it then, like, maybe I was too early, but I don't know, when is too early?
Exactly.
Right? But we just made a ton of mistakes along the way. Like, I'll give you a good example. So we needed to find like barbers, right? To become our MVP, right? So we designed the app.
So this is what, similar to Trim It in a sense?
Yeah. But this was it's quite similar to Booksy, which is a lot bigger now, right? But Trim It was around back in those days, right? But I'll give you a good example, as I mentioned. So like we've built the like what an MVP would look like, so the minimum viable product. It's not super complex to build. It wasn't like fucking talking to loads of different databases and stuff, right? And I'm so eager to get like, we need the MVP. The quicker thing we need to do is get our users to use this and like give us feedback. Like, well, shit, what isn't what we need to improve, right? And I'm so eager. I'm booking meetings with like these celebrity hairdressers, like big barbers, and I'm like, we'd love to come and show you our product as an example. I remember we booked this massive one with this barber in Knightsbridge. He's invited us to this private hotel suite. I'm like, this is it. We get him on board, you know. We get him to just do a little post.
We're
you
clear.
know, we've gone clear. We've got our first like user. Then we can begin to build and then build and build. God, boys, we got to demo day.
Yeah.
Good Lord, our developer didn't turn up. To the MVP, you know? So me and Zaf are there, and Zaf, man, he's my guy because we've been through so much, right? So you've got to imagine, I've been hounding this guy to get a meeting with him. He does all these hairdressers, all these celebrities, like big guy in the game. And get on board, like he's an advocate for what you do. These big hair conferences, you know, these big hair. You went to one with your barber right recently, right?
Salon International.
Exactly, he was big there. He was like one of the big guys back in the day, anyway, right? So when we get him in, he's our access to that network, right? MVP presentation day, Knightsbridge. I'm just shocked.
What, you wearing the blue suit?
No. I've gone back to next. I've got a new one, right? Got to keep budgets low. It was tight back then. You know, I wasn't in tech yet back then. Presentation days come up. Developer hasn't turned up, and I'm thinking on my feet. I'm like, fuck! Like, we have to show them how this works. And
so is your developer just ignoring your calls at this point?
Bro, that's I think we need a whole podcast for that story. But that's a whole different podcast. But you know, we've got there now, which we need to present our MVP to this guy. We need to show him how it's going to work if he had it in his shop. And if I was a customer, how I'd book, right? Fuck, and I'm panicking now, we don't have it. And I had this app called Envision at the time, right? And Envision essentially allowed you to build wireframes, right? So it wouldn't work specifically like an app would, but it would mimic the logic of an app, right? So I'm there now. But we've only done Envision. I've only built Envision for the customer side because I was getting customer feedback on it. Because we'd already essentially built Envision for the back end, right? And we were already in build for that, right? So I didn't have it with me on the laptop. I only had the customer side. So I'm telling the guy we're meeting, I'm like, apologies, we've had some issues with our developer. And he's thinking, bro, how much you were hounding me to get this meeting, right? And I'm like, but wait, look at this product. And he was like, I like it. Can you show me the full piece? Can you show me something which actually works, right? And we had a few of those moments along the way in terms of code delivered on time, stuff like that. And also, as I mentioned as well, like probably bad decision making from us from a strategic perspective as well. Like maybe we should have done more in terms of actually building like a wait list of clients as an example, right? If I look back at what I would do now, it's a very different approach, right? But super, super kind of challenging time. A lot of mistakes were made along the way, as I mentioned, right? But as I'm making those mistakes, I'm also learning from those mistakes, right? And if I'm to do it again, like I'm not making those same mistakes, right? So yeah, that was a very challenging like time in terms of trying to build something where you haven't built anything before. But when I talk to my friends about it, I'm like, fuck, that shit was really fun, you know? Like it was so tough, but like it never felt like work. Like even just like going to some of these meetings, like going into the wireframe, trying to build it out, like, okay, like how are we gonna make money? Like thinking about how you'd market the product, like all these things, like it never felt like work. And like even when I think about it now, like it brings me so much joy thinking about how fun that process was, right?
Yeah.
But that's not to say that trying to build a business doesn't come with its downside. It's very lonely. Like, I remember when like we had that meeting and it hasn't gone so well and we can't get another meeting with the guy, like I'm feeling low because I'm like, that's on me, you know? So there were those ups and downs.
Yeah.
But like, when I look back on that whole process, like fundamentally way more net positive than negative, right?
Yeah.
However, you know, like, and obviously I talk to you a lot about this as obviously one of my very good friends, but like that failure, right? And then like landing a job at like Meta, like not long like after like shutting everything down.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I want to say it slowed me down, but like it made
everything's a little bit more rosy now.
Yeah, everything is rosy, but it also made me a lot risk averse. Yeah, like. And Danny, we talk about this a lot when it like Danny was like, "Hey, how about this? What do you think about this?" And I'm like,
I've given this guy so many ideas. I'm like, bro, today I have a new pitch, and he's like, nah.
But like, and because of that failure, and like, I do remember some like super dark moments, like being alone and like thinking about like, fuck, I've got to tell everyone that we failed, and everyone who supported me along the way. And those moments are really tough, and they're very lonely, right?
Yeah.
And nobody tells you that before starting out.
Yeah.
And I think when I look back on like where I am now and maybe not taking risks on certain things, like especially when it comes to business things, it's the fear of having to go back and like relive that, which has stopped me from doing that. Fast forward now, like I've really thought about that moment, right? And I frame it in a completely different way now, even when I'm talking to you guys, right? But I also have to be honest that like that failure also did impact the way I looked at things shortly after. Even though it's changed now, like after it did have a bit of an impact. But net, like amazing experience, like yeah, like I can't wait to do it again, basically, you know. Yeah.
Would you say because of that, and I guess it's for everyone listening, and for myself, when it comes to start-up business, etc., would you say you mentioned it was lonely? Would you say it's completely goes? Would you strongly recommend against people going into it alone, or would you say it's something that you need to go in as a partner? Because I've heard many things about, you know, it's a lonely space. Even you mentioned it was lonely. You had a partner, you know. For anyone that's feeling like they want to do startup, whether it's tech, whether it's retail, whether it's e-commerce, like, and Danny, chip in, like, is the hardest road not necessarily the best road?
I think you learn a lot more from going through the fire than not going through the fire, right?
Yeah.
But it depends what type of business you're building, I think, in terms of the type of team you need to have. But I think if you're talking about like trying to build a startup, like you basically need to find people with like complementary skill sets, right? Who can plug the holes that you're unable to fill, right? So I think for that type of industry, for trying to build a startup, like you need a team. And actually, like, it's more helpful when you have a team, right? Because then you're all rowing in the same direction, you're all feeling the same pain. I think if you're the founder of any company, like the burden always stops with you, right? If you succeed, it's with you. If it fails, it's with you, right? We see all these big CEOs are celebrated now, right? Because they won, right? We don't see all the ones that failed along the way, right? But I still think a team to get from A to B is extremely important for sure.
Yeah, I think, I mean, what's interesting is, and a lot of people don't know this, but originally Blacksmith was meant to be me and Hakim. Originally it was meant to be me and Hacks, and I remember...
Deep. You're really giving out all the secrets.
Yeah, we are.
Damn it.
I remember we were in... So, context for those who don't know, I know Hakim because we worked together at Facebook. I was directly in his team, and quite honestly, like within the first few months, he like really just took me under his wing. And so a lot of the things that I know now is partly because of Hakim. And I remember like within the first few months, I noticed that, okay, Hacks has got the same mindset as me, and like he really gets me when I talk about things like entrepreneurship and ambition and all the other things that we talk about probably for too much time. Yeah. We went on holidays together and some other friends in sort of April.
Great holiday.
Great holiday. Yeah. In, I want to say, April 2019-ish, something like that. And it was around that sort of time that my mind was bubbling away. Like I want to start something again. I tried and failed to launch my own business back at uni. And I thought, you know, Hakim's a perfect person for me to do this with. And we were out at a museum, and that's when I started saying to him, oh, like we should maybe start looking at jewelry. And so after some time and after some months, me and Hack started looking into doing Blacksmith together, and it just wasn't the right time for us. And I'm hoping obviously one day there's a right opportunity, the right time for us to come back together and actually start something together. I think that'd be great. And then obviously I went alone. And I've been doing Blacksmith London alone ever since then. I've been a one-man band. So the good thing about doing it by yourself is you have complete control of the decision making, and so to an extent you can move quicker in that regard. Like you execute your vision to a T. But on the flip side, so much of the support, critical thinking, the positive challenge that you get from the other person, you then lack. And I think if I were to do it again, I'll definitely do it with other people for sure. You know, I tried to start, or I have been trying to start another business on the side. Originally was meant to be with another friend of mine. We had to part ways for very, very positive reasons. And I really believe that doing it with another person or with a group of people is great, because sometimes, yes, it can be lonely, but more than anything, like you learn from the people around you. So I think, you know, advice to anybody out there, you know, no matter what industry you're going in, my personal opinion is if you can team up with the right people who can fill the gaps in your skill set, in your knowledge, your expertise, and also more than anything, your personality. Sometimes you might be going into a business more or less blind. You know, I didn't have experience in e-com or jewelry or fashion beforehand. But you can pick up some of those skills along the way. But more than anything, the things that you lack are the character traits that perhaps don't lean into your strengths. So for example, for me and Hakim, we've been in sales and partnerships and client relationship management for a few years now. We're both very good at that. Perhaps we would need to team up with someone who's more techie or more finance based or operations based, you know, a product marketer or a product developer. So I'd say think about those things.
Yeah, and I think just to like add on to that as well, right? So when I think about like when me and Danny got into it, like it was just excitement, let's do something. Right? But like I generally now looking back like on that experience, I feel like if you're going to do a business, whether you're doing it alone or you're doing it with your friend, like you have to be deeply passionate about the product or the problem you're solving, right?
Even the vision.
Yeah, even the vision, right? Because I think if let's say like me and Danny working together on this business and like we're not as passionate about, or one person's less passionate than the other, like that's when like that's not the right product to be working on, or business to be working on together. So like as Danny mentioned, like of course have a team, but like I think it's really important to both have that same vision and the same passion for the problem or the product that you're selling, because then like it never wanes along the way. You know? And the thing with me and Danny when we're working together, like after a while I was like, I don't know if I'm passionate about this vertical enough, as an example, right? And then that then doesn't become fair on Dan, as an example, to like be working on a business, but then like I'm not fully in, or like I'm not feeling the way I should feel when I'm working on it, you know. So I think that is also a super, super important element to
the vibes have to be aligned.
100%. No, I guess I asked that question because it's like Danny's full of ideas, right? So
honestly, ideas machine. This guy. You need a business.
He is.
I've been watching too much Shark Tank.
He is a startup hub. We'll be talking about you know, what do you think about, I don't know, Inception? He's like, so have you ever thought about?
It's crazy because I actually do need to chat to you about something else next week.
So like no, but like in terms of that, I guess it's just a case of, you know, I think we alluded to it, and Danny alluded to it in the start episode, where the entrepreneurial spirit, I've always championed it. I feel like everyone should have it. I do believe in entrepreneurial like careers where
100%.
Like, have a career where you get a sandpit and you can make the best of it, and you're empowered by your management, right? But I do, well, not a but really, but on top of that, I do feel like it's not necessarily the entrepreneurial spirit, but I do feel like entrepreneurship is glamorized like to an insane level, and I'm not here to just like kick on it, because I would also say when we're all in tech, that is also glamorized. Like I kind of roll my eyes when I see people like,
oh, you must just do everything. You get everything free. You must do no.
But I don't even mind that, because I will be really getting things for free. But what I do mind is like, and maybe this is the grumpy old man in me, but it'll be like, and I feel like this is where sympathy is not there for like people going through hardship in tech right now, is because for the last 2 years, people have been making content on platforms like, hey, this is my life working in tech. And it'll be like, it's great visually, but you're not actually showing like, you know how you brought that kid into to your offices and be like, oh, this is who you need to talk to. It's not actual practical things. It's kind of more of a
glamorizing the lifestyle almost of working into
yes.
Yeah,
and I've seen that for entrepreneurs where it's like, you know, I work for myself, blah, 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 blah. You know, I can never go back to work. And I guess like, I'm just so, I don't understand why things are so polarizing. And I want to get you guys' view on like, having both gone into that space, you've both been in careers, you've both been creative, you've both been in sales. Like, what's your take on it in terms of just like how everything seems to be like all or nothing or pro this and anti this? Do you guys just get sick of it and just take a step back or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, Dan, but for me, like, I think tech is a bit over glamorized. Like at the end of the day, like we do work for great companies who of course give you great benefits, but like at the end of the day, we're employed to come there and do a specific job, regardless of the function that you're in. Yeah. And you know, when you see these like a day in their life and they're doing this, they're doing that. Like, no, bro, like, we're at our desks. You know, like,
I'm not playing table tennis like for 6 hours.
Exactly. Like, you still have the 1 hour. Like they're not just allowing you to just not do anything. At work. And especially like the companies we work for, like they're obviously like they've got really high expectations, really high goals. So like if you're not pulling your weight, like you're going to be found out. You know? But yeah, I think it's definitely over glamorized. I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, like it's difficult, and I think the best entrepreneurs will tell you that it's a really difficult journey and they don't over glamorize it. But you do have some of those guys online who make everything seem like you can just have a video camera, go to Bali and just like kind of live off the land or whatever, you know. But Dan, I don't know about you. What do you think?
I think number one, I completely agree. I think whether it's tech or whether it's entrepreneurship, it's real work. And for example, let's take tech first. There are a few companies at the very, very top who will treat you fantastically. Yeah, I think, you know, the perks, the benefits, the lifestyle, the people that you're surrounded by, of course it's great. And at the same time, there's a lot of shit work that you have to do. Yeah, everyone's got to do the admin. Everyone's got to go through the trials and tribulations. You go through pressure, there's stress. And when you're at company, imposter syndrome is huge. And I think, you know, when you're in companies like that, especially amongst top talent, all of a sudden that imposter syndrome tenfolds. And so, you know, the skills that you have are no longer special. So there's a lot of mental challenges, I think. And ultimately, more than anything, it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, for sure.
And at the same time, you know, taking out some of those big tech companies, most of the industry is not what you're seeing on some of these social media platforms. It is a lot more corporate. It isn't as glamorous as you think it is. And then going into entrepreneurship, I don't know what the stat is off the top of my head, but I'm quite sure it's something like 90+% of businesses fail within the first year or first couple of years. And, you know, I failed one business before. Blacksmith hasn't gone the way I thought it was going to go within this specific time frame. It's been up and down, up and down.
Still time, I got an idea.
Yeah. Oh, you got some funding as well. You know, the third business that I'm working on, that's been super tough. So, you know, there's a close friend of ours that Hakim and I both know who we worked with, and he's done amazing. And I think, you know, some people, including us, could look at him and be like, wow, like he's living the dream now in the life. But we also know that he went through his own trials and tribulations and multiple failures
before he,
exactly. So like we know that it takes a lot of, it's very cliche, a lot of persistence, a lot of pivoting, a lot of failure. And I think, you know, if you go into this game, you have to go in knowing that that's the price that you have to pay to hopefully eventually be successful. And there's a few startups or, you know, a few people that have these, you know, big career blow ups short term. Those are, you know, edge cases. They're the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess to wrap up the episode, you know, H, what would you say is in the next 5 years to expect from you?
Tough question. It's a tough question, but do you know what? I think for me, like, I've got really lofty ambitions in terms of like what I want to accomplish. Like, honestly, like every year I've got targets of what I want to accomplish. So this year was like get my house, end of the year get a second house. Like, I've got really lofty ambitions. And yeah, I'm going after it in the next however many years. If it's 5 years, I'm going after it in 5 years. If it's the next 20 years, I'm going after it in the next 20 years. Yeah. But I'm just going to focus on maximizing my wins, I guess, minimizing my losses, and like staying in the game, I guess. You know, that's the plan.
Okay. And now we've got Danny here as a co-host, so he's always going to be pitching ideas. But now, Hakim, thank you so much for coming on the episode. We really
I hope I
appreciate
get another
it.
invite.
Yeah. So, listeners, please DM me how you feel Danny done this episode as a co-host.
Come on, guys, bring me back. Honestly.
Hakim, really appreciate it. Where can people find you if they want to connect to you, or what are you working on?
Yeah. So Hakim Bukenya on LinkedIn, I guess, is probably the best way to find me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not give out socials right now. But yeah, man, always available, especially if you need help with getting into tech, just any advice, whatever I know, I can try to impart. But yeah, I'm always happy to kind of reach out and speak to people. Even this was basically through one of our friends, and I really enjoyed the experience. So I'm open.
And I would say, guys, I definitely do reach out. And, I know that we joke around a lot and stuff, but, to add to what Melvin said, thank you, number one, for being here and being part of this conversation. Hakim's a great friend of mine, is somebody that I have looked up to for many years now. So yeah, thank you for the last few years, and thank you for today.
Yes, sir. Let's go.
And if anyone wants to go to a wedding, please submit it. He prefers under 5'5", Yeah, just kidding, right? Yeah.
I wish.
But guys, thanks for listening. This has been YouGet Podcast.